Hey, what's up, guys? This is Dylan, and today I'm going to be talking about production assisting. So, I wanted to tell you about some of the things that I personally do and what I believe has really helped me become successful in working as a PA. Now, the first thing when it comes to being a production assistant is getting rid of the idea that you shouldn't be a production assistant. Just because you have other skills, that's not what you were brought on for, even though those skills are very valuable in doing your job. You still want to fully focus on being in your job specifically. And what I mean by that is, like, if you have a passion to do camera or lighting, of course, you want to help out that department as much as possible, but you also want to stay focused in your department and not neglecting your own duties in order to go do those duties for camera or lighting. So obviously, just to explain and kind of go back to square one, being a production assistant is essentially helping out the production department. And production is primarily responsible for logistics of a film set, and that includes food, which is also, it's kind of twofold. It's catering and it's crafty. They're responsible for transportation, which includes, shuttles to and from hotel sets, locations to locations, picking you up from the airport, dropping off, all that, dealing with your luggage, all that. So your job as a PA is being the boots on the deck, the first line of production. You are the production presence. And that includes just helping out wherever you can. When you first jump in to a job, you don't know anybody, so you just look for ways to be useful and valuable to that production. If you see something happening in front of you and you are capable of doing something about it, then go for it. Just jump in and start doing things. People won't always tell you or have the time to tell you what to do, so you have to just kind of calculate it for yourself and just do it. Part of the core responsibilities is obviously driving big vehicles. So that includes like SUVs, 15-passenger vans, minivans, picture cars. That kind of, it can be something to get used to, because not everybody is comfortable driving, vehicles that they're not used to handling. Because the bigger the vehicle is, the more calculated you have to be and the more cautious you have to be with, like, leaving bigger gaps in front of cars in front of you or slowing down, further away. That way, because you're pushing a lot of weight, and it's the weight you can stop a 3,000 pound sedan much easier than like an 8,000 pound SUV or more for a truck or something like that. So just things to be aware of when you're driving, lots of people, which can also be stressful because have a lot of personalities, because, some people can just be a trip and you're just like, oh my God. So like you have a lot going on behind you. Meanwhile, you're trying to operate a big vehicle on probably an area you're unfamiliar with. So that's why having your GPS set up is so key. And don't have that shit in your lap. Like, don't be looking down at a cup holder. You want to have that on the window if you can. Like, if you can get a GPS mount that you can bring with you on jobs and just like take with you when you get out of the vehicle, because you don't know if you're going to be driving that vehicle in the future. You might just be hopping out. So you just have to keep track of that. So yeah, just, be cautious about stuff like that. Obviously, a big thing of being a PA is doing runs, and that includes like Starbucks, Office Depot, gas stations, airport runs. Airport runs are special. If you have experience with like Uber or Lyft, then you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. You obviously have to deal with their luggage, and it's kind of your job to kind of like help them with their luggage, both sides. So that means like loading it in and loading it out. Just being like a taxi driver, And then obviously there are two key differences when it comes to set versus office. Basically, office is more responsible for like paperwork and office logistics. Sometimes it depends on the show. So like as a show gets bigger, there's more departments and more like variations of things. If you're on a really small production, then you might be the only. If you're only the only PA, then you're just production assistant, you know. But like if there's multiple PAs, or if there's multiple departments that require production, or multiple locations that require production, then it kind of gets divided more and more as you go down and whittle it down more. Also, another thing that's really helped me a lot is kind of getting used to the things that bother you. Sometimes it takes a little bit of maturity to kind of get used to the stuff that you're just like, oh, why does this aggravate me all the time? And sometimes that's just building character, you know? Like, okay, yeah, it might not be the greatest thing in that moment, but like if you can kind of look past it and not give off a bad vibe, then you're going to seem like much more happy person. You're going to, you know, show maturity that you can grow from situations like that, you know? So if you feel like there's something that you're just really trying to get past, just try to think about it in a positive light and, you know, kind of cope with that situation. Because, you know, when you kind of get into this negative headspace, it has a tendency to translate visually to your body language and your vibe. And you may not think it, you might think you're fooling people, but it's easy to kind of read people and that they're in a bad mood if you're kind of upset. And that's something I used to do a lot, where I would really hate someone for something that they did to me or something, and I would just be angry. You know, I just walk around like, you know, just like, and then people are afraid to approach you, and they, you know, if you're always like that, then they might not want to work with you. So it's also something to think about too. And then this is something especially for people that are just starting out, like within the last year or so. Freaking listen to the people that are talking and stop talking. Don't talk when you're being told things that you probably don't know. And sometimes, here's the thing, it will start to sound like you know it, but if you shut up and listen, they'll get to parts that you haven't heard before. You know, like, think about it like that. It's just, when you're kind of the newer person in a situation, it's better to learn from the people that have been doing it way longer than you have. So just, you know, talk less and listen more. That's one thing I've learned over the years. Also, a really tricky thing, and this is something to also get, you know, a little intimidated by when you first start out, is when to talk and when not to. Because obviously you want to be friendly and open, but it's a fine line between talking too much and not. Because it's very possible to be on the you don't talk at all, and then people get weirded out by you level, you know, because I've seen that too. I've been like that at times, where I'm so intimidated by the crew and the scale of the project that I'm on that I stop, you know, I'm scared to say anything because I'm intimidated by the situation. So that's understandable when you're first starting out, and when you kind of have that starry eye like effect still, where you're just like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing, and then you start overthinking things, and that's when like you kind of get like scared or to say anything to your boss, you know, that you're intimidated by. So part of it is just getting comfortable and remembering that, like, these are still people at the end of the day. Yes, they might be very wound tight. Yes, they might be a little bit extra or more. And yeah, it might be a stressful situation. But at the end of the day, people just want to, like, relax sometimes and not have to, like, you know, always be in, like, an upstrung, like, sort of mood, you know? Like, you can still talk about normal things and treat them like normal people. Show them a respect that they deserve, but still remember at the end of the day, you're still a person, you know, and so are they. So they still need to drink water. They still need to eat snacks. They still, you know, like, you can kind of like do stuff like that, and give the, go get them waters or whatever. Or, just like finding ways that are relevant. And this is what I mean by relevant. If you see the line producer, and then the line producer works with the PM, and then the PM works with the PC, and then the PC works with the APOC, and you're over here being an office PA, like, you have less and less reason to talk to a higher up person. And that's where I was saying it kind of gets a little intimidating, is when you start thinking about, oh, this person's the line producer, I shouldn't talk to them. Yes and no. Yes, you should, because it just depends on the situation. If you're just chilling, have nothing to do, that person's chilling and hasn't, like, they're okay and they're not busy. If you see people typing or texting or in deep thought, in deep concentration, do not break that concentration. That's the number one thing that can aggravate people about being a production assistant, is because you have the right question but the wrong time. And it's really timing that's everything. You have to time when they're, like, unwinding for a second. I know it sounds like slightly crazy, but, like, when you hear people, like, sigh, like a long sigh, like, they just finish something. Like, I guarantee you, when you hit that send button and you're just like, okay, I got through that moment, and they're not on to the next thing yet, then you can kind of interrupt there. But if you're interrupting in a mid-thought, they might just blow off your thing you said. So be aware of that. And that is true for conversations. You obviously want to wait until, like, that person has a moment to talk to you. If it's something pressing, then you do have to press. And if it's something dangerous, remember, safety is always first. So if there's something unsafe, it doesn't matter. Like, you have to burst in, but, like, any other moment, you want to try to wait and, like, but, it's just like priority levels. If that person's waiting on you for something, then that is the highest priority ever. But if that person's talking about the shot and everything, and then you're over here like, do you want fruit snacks? Then that's probably not, like, the most, like, best thing to say to that person. So, like, just kind of gauge it. It's all about gauging situation, because the cool thing about film is it's always changing. It's a very dynamic situation. It's never the same, and that's awesome, because you can always be adapting to new things and new experiences, and that's why I truly love working in the film industry. That being said, though, it might be an intense moment, it might be a light moment, there might be chilling, there might be not. So kind of gauge that and see kind of what's going on. So next up, I call this segment the study of money. Basically, you have to be really good at managing your finances if you want to work as a production assistant or in production in general. And I don't mean production department, I mean film production in general. You have to be good at managing your money, because the thing about it is it's a very feast or famine business. You have times of plenty, and then you have times of nothing, and it's terrible, and you're just waiting for the next cycle to hit. But in the meantime, you be out here just like, ugh. So it's about getting through those moments, and how you do that is you spend less than you make. And I know it sounds crazy, but you can't live right down to the penny. You have to have buffer. And what I mean by that is, if you made, let's just say you made a couple $1,000s on the show, right? And okay, it cost me this much to live per month. If okay, this might be a dry period of like a month or something. Yeah, it'd be like that sometimes. Or a couple weeks, then all right, I need this much to survive until this time. So if you run at, let's just say, for example, you run at $2,000 per month, right? So you need about $500 per week. And if you made $1,000 in 1 week, you can now survive 2 weeks. So even if you don't work for another week, you can still work that week and get paid by the time you need more money. If that makes sense. So it's just kind of like juggling that and just kind of like paying towards the future, because you want to be saving up for the right things and the right moves. You obviously need to make investments of gear and situation in order to get to the next points, but you also got to be smart about what you're doing with that money in the meantime of waiting for the next thing. Now, it might be time of plenty. You might be working on shows. You might be getting booked right after the next one, just like back to back to back to back. Or you could hit, I don't know, a coronavirus and not work for weeks. So you never know. And you want to be prepared for that moment. You don't want to be like right on the edge all the time to where at any given moment it could all fall apart. You don't want to be at that point. Now, you might be thinking, all right, well, sometimes you're not blessed and you're not just getting gigs left and right. It's not flowing like milk and honey, sometimes it's dry. So what do? You get side hustles that you can dip in and out of very easily. It's not the easiest thing in the world to kind of keep something going on the side when you have to drop literally everything and work 12 plus hours on set every single day for 6 days or whatever more straight. It's not easy to maintain like a job, for example, even part-time. It's very difficult to do that, but it can be done. The other thing would be working for apps like Uber, Lyft, Postmates, Instacart. There's a lot of things that you can do that are kind of just like on demand that you get paid instantly. Like I call those instant gratification jobs because you don't have to wait like a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get paid. It's just like you can work and then it's instant cash. The only problem with those is you don't really make that much, honestly, in my opinion. I mean, when you're first starting out and your expenses are very low, then sure, yeah, it's pretty decent. But after a while and you start figuring out the patterns of it and how it produces and stuff, you're just like, this really isn't that much money for my time. So be very careful about how much you put into it and never ever sacrifice any like gig for, doing Uber or something like that. Nothing against those companies. They're great to work for in certain areas and at certain times. It's all time-based. That's another thing entirely, but it is a source of income if you need it. But I only recommend those in certain cities. It's usually the big hubs like Los Angeles, New York City, Chicago, whatever, the big cities, Miami, but then if you're in smaller cities that don't have as much circulation, then you're really not going to make much because you're going to be waiting around a long time for orders or rides or whatever it is. So that's why I caution about those kind of on-demand apps for sources of income. That could also dry up too. You never know. Like Christmas time, for example, once everybody kind of left LA and they all went out and then started coming back after New Year's, it was dry, man. It was dry as dust, I'm telling you. There was no rides, and it was because everybody was broke. They just spent all their money over the holidays, and it was just like nothing. So it was just like, ugh. But it eventually picked up, and it was fine. But that's what I'm saying is like you can't put all your eggs in one basket like that. But it's a very necessary thing to be surviving in film. And if you can do things that pay better, by all means do it. Like the more like niche that knowledge is, the better. So like I can make way more doing editing or visual effects or something like that, titles. I can make way more per hour doing that. So obviously I'll always do that. But sometimes when you're first starting out, when you're like 19 or something and you just graduated, you don't really have all those skill sets yet, so you just got to do with what, just do what you got. But if you can build those, it is better. So next up, I'm going to talk about building your kit. It's very necessary to have a quote-unquote kit for anything you do. You always want to have a kit, no matter what. Even if you're a PA, you're just like, oh, well, it's such a basic position. No, you need a kit. You always need a kit. This includes things like your surveillance earpiece for your headset, for your walkie, or Sharpies or pens or paper clips, or like something to keep your petty cash in, or clipboards for schedules and call sheets, and, the list goes on. Your personal computer, like most people use MacBook Pros, but like you can get just a laptop, that's a part of your kit. Anything that you use personally, your phone, your everything, you have to just build it up over time, and you need more, and it helps to have better tools, but like that's just like an ongoing process. So that is also, in my opinion, your ticket out of being a production assistant as well, is building your kit to another position that you essentially want to be. And that's what I was talking before about, essentially modeling after the person that you want to eventually become. And, you over time, in those moments of gravy, when you're making a lot of money, you kind of, throw a couple $100 into a new piece of gear or something, and that will help you advance and get better and get more experience. That helps a lot. I mean, if your goal is to work in a specific department, then start investing in the tools in order to do it. I personally think that's the best way to essentially moving out of being a production assistant. Nothing against it. It's hard to find good PAs. It's hard to find reliable people because it takes a while to get used to, and often it's people just getting used to working in the film industry in general, and that's the tricky part. But at the same time, people want to move up too, so it's kind of a revolving door of position. The last thing I want to cover for kit is essentially what I carry in my own personal kit. Now I have a lot of kits. Actually, I have a art kit, a lighting kit, probably the most resources I put into that, and then a little bit of camera, and then production. Recent development has really been coming up recently. And for production, this is mostly stuff I've acquired over shows. And the nice thing about production specifically is you get a lot of free stuff. Like, I mean, the show's over, they need to do something with it. It needs to go away. People are flying out of town and it needs to go somewhere. So usually it's the last person there that gets it. And that works out so great. So that could be anything. That can be like, just stuff like crafty and water bottles and like, just resources that were like expendable, that was just like, okay, you can have that, you can take that home, like catering or something, or, whatever. It's so nice sometimes. And over time, I've, spent my own money on getting like a MacBook Pro because that's like industry standard, or just getting like a good bag to carry everything in, because if you're kind of fumbling around with stuff and not very organized, you might miss that moment that you need it, and then it doesn't look good, it doesn't look like you're organized. So getting a good bag is very important, and you just put everything in it, everything that you need that helps you do your job. And some of it is like personal care, like, gum or breath mints or like Pepto-Bismol and Advil, or like, just personal hygiene stuff like deodorant or shaving if you're a man, or whatever else you need. Like, like it can also be like things like Sharpies or pens or pencils, even highlighters. You can carry your own Scotch tape if you do like taping receipts and all that, or get a little banker's bag for your petty cash. You don't want to be carrying that around. You definitely don't want to lose money, and you definitely don't want to lose receipts, because if you lose that receipt, you have to pay for it. Like, if people advance you petty cash and then you can't prove an expense, that's coming out of your pocket. So keep that in mind. It's very important to keep that receipt. And then, you can kind of see them all and everything, and keep other stuff in there. Like, I keep a cube tap in there, just as like a little, something if I'm working somewhere and I need to plug in my computer, but also a phone or, whatever, printer. I also got a printer recently. That helps a lot. It's a very important thing. Just stuff that, you need, and same is true for any department. If you want to work in lighting, start buying C-stands, or, just get the basic things. Get what you can afford. Just make sure you can afford it, but get things that you can afford. Like, if you're like, let's just say you like graduated and you have zero, zilch, nothing, nada. Man, this is a little tricky, because I was like, oh man, if you were going into lighting, I would say get like your basic tools, like crescent wrench or like a Leatherman, or I don't know, just stuff like that. If you're going into camera, get some good, like, get a walkie pouch. That helps a lot. And that's not for camera, that's for anything. Just work on your kit. It's a lifelong process. It's not going to happen, in one purchase. It's many purchases, and it takes a long time. And then the last subject I want to talk about is the next jump, the next move, the next big move in your life, and how to execute that. Because we all have those moments where you need to take a big step in order to get to the next point in your career. And most of the time, that's relocating to a new city. It's exciting and just scary all at the same time. I mean, you can be going to a new area and you have to cope with a new situation. So I've relocated quite a bit of times in my career so far, and hopefully kind of stay in the same areas now. But I would move from like LA or I would start in Florida, and then I moved to LA, and then to Georgia for a little bit, and then back to Florida, and then to LA. Like, I bounced around a lot because it was just how that, my life was kind of shaping, So in order to get to the next point, you do need a bigger lump of cash. I've done moves across the country for like $4,000 or $5,000 realistically, because if you break down the cost, you basically need first month's, last month's of security deposit. Just plan for it, even if you don't think you'll need last month's and the security deposit. Just have it just in case. You need living costs for however long you think it's going to take before you start working, because there will be definitely a period of downtime before you actually start getting in, because it takes time for stuff to start happening because nobody knows that you live there yet. And then you obviously need to have actual operational costs of moving, so that includes like gas, food, hotel expenses, whatever you need in order to get to the next point. So for me, you can get across the country staying at like fairly like cheap hotels for like $500. Honestly, that should get you, because it's only like a 4-day drive, more or less. If you're trying to see stuff, then maybe take like a week. If you're trying to book it, like some people do it in less. I think it's kind of dumb to drive more than 600 or 700 miles in a day, just because, you don't want to fall asleep at the wheel, and especially if you're by yourself. If you're trading off with people, it helps. Then you can do it as fast as you want to. Just depends on how you're trying to do it and how long and how far it is. But if it was like me, Florida to LA, it's quite a trek. The next thing is finding a house. Now, let's say you got a show and they want you there in like 10 days. And you're like, crap. So you got like a couple days to move, a couple days to hightail it to the next point, and then a couple days to set up shop. So what I would do is obviously pack up your house as fast as possible. Make sure you have the money to do it all, and then make the leap, and then get there and set up a place that's like short term, like Airbnb or a hotel or some place that you can stay and like hunt out places. So you want to get like a couple days so you can go look at places, and then you can search on like Craigslist and any other directories. Hopefully the person that you're moving in with, it helps. But if you don't have that available, then you can just look for, just random things and just kind of feel it out. Like, I'm a very go off the vibe of someone else type of person, so I just kind of feel them out. If I don't feel right about going and living with that person, then I'm not going to, And then as for like finding work, this is where side hustles comes in. So like you want to like try to get you want to get cash flow as soon as possible. So even if that means getting a part-time job somewhere, it's not the end of the world, because you'll still have a lot of days. odds are that part-time job is going to start you off very slow, so no worries. It's not like you'll be fully booked right away. And then you can kind of ease in day playing gigs wherever you can get them. Anytime you move to a near area, you definitely want to try to have something. Like, I wouldn't go out there just on a whim of like, okay, I'll find it. I'll do this, this, and this to find gigs. You want to have at least one solid like booking before you try to do a jump like that, just to get the ball rolling. Because if you're going from zero, it's very difficult and can be pretty scary time. So definitely be aware of that. But it can be done, like if you really have a commitment to it. I mean, you just got to think outside the box. Sometimes you might need to start going out to like bars and parties and stuff like that and just see who you can meet. Because I've met people at parties and I did multiple jobs with them after that, or somebody just knew someone else and they texted them and then you text them and then they can get you on for something. I mean, it's a very like who basis, and it's tricky sometimes and it's scary, but like it's so rewarding once you do finally get it and once you make it there. But it can be done, and you don't ever want to lose hope of like, I can't do this because blah, 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 blah. No, you can. You really can. It's scary. It feels like you're jumping off a cliff sometimes, but it can be done. And it's very important to do it when you're young, when you still have the chance to kind of screw up and make mistakes. Because you will, that's unavoidable. But if you truly have a passion for what you're doing and what you're working in, then it will come. I can't say how or when or where, but you will get it if you push. So these are just some of my experiences that I've had with working full-time as a PA for many years. I mean, it's not a long time. I mean, I've maybe solidly been doing it a total of 4 years, like full-time. Because like it's kind of how I started was I started day playing in film school. Just any free day that I had, I tried to book it. And I got booked on like, reality shows and stuff like that. And then it started getting bigger and bigger once I finally had the time to commit full time. And it was, took off, but it takes time to build that. I mean, if you haven't already, get on Staff Me Up and look at like Facebook pages, post jobs and stuff, and friend people that work in the industry too, because they might post, they're looking for someone just on their Facebook statuses. And then obviously hit up anybody that works and just stay in their ear, and things will open up.